There were some questions, there were people from the Indic society who were
Right.
actually asking a question that
Good.
what were the results of the commissions or the committee which were set up by government of India, and what was the whether the Britishers at that point of time 1945-46, whether the Britishers have also established a committee to investigate the death issue of Bose, and what was the difference between, or whether there was any difference between the reports of the commission of the inquiry set up by the Britishers and later on by the Shah Nawaz committee. That was the question who the young people were asking actually.
Okay. Okay. No, that's good. I mean, it's better to turn it into a question answer format so that
Right,
I
right.
can directly answer the questions.
Yes, yes,
So,
Baba.
as far as this question is concerned, investigation is concerned, commissions and committees are concerned, uh, as soon as the news of the so-called plane crash and Netaji's death in it was spread, of course, the British government reacted. I mean, and it is now well known that the Viceroy of India at that time, General Wavell, he wrote in his diary that I don't believe this because this is exactly what somebody in his place would have done to escape from that area. So, what the British government did is they sent teams, police teams for investigation, teams of intelligence agents for investigating on the ground, on the spot, as to what happened. And they contacted their American counterparts, and some investigation team was also sent on behalf of General MacArthur. So two teams were sent from one from the government of India, another team from Mountbatten, another from MacArthur, and they conducted their investigations. So none of the teams, I mean, they met up with the captured INA soldiers. They interrogated the Japanese soldiers who survived the so-called plane crash. They interrogated the Japanese technicians, engineers, and others in the Saigon aerodrome from where the last flight was supposed to have taken off, and also at Taihoku, and people who were in Taihoku, and they interrogated Habibur Rahman. So a detailed interrogation process was conducted, and this was also the time when the INA soldiers were being brought back to Delhi for their trials. They were imprisoned, they were kept there for their trials, and the CSDIC, the British government's intelligence agency here for the army, in the detailed interrogation center which the British government had set up. Uh, they interrogated practically everybody who came back. So a detailed interrogation process was conducted for all these people, but none of them could establish with evidence that the plane crash actually took place and that Netaji died in it, along with 6 or 7 Japanese passengers. So, and what they highlighted, everyone highlighted that there were several and very significant inconsistencies in their accounts, not only between person A, B, and C, but even when person A was talking at different points of time to different people, they were giving out different pieces of information. Their accounts were not matching. Habibur Rahman, who was the sole Indian eyewitness, the so-called eyewitness to the plane crash and Netaji's death, the intelligence reports were very clear. There was no doubt, and they wrote it down in their reports very clearly that he is not speaking the truth. He is withholding information, and his accounts are not fully trustworthy because he is resenting. He is resenting the interrogation process. He doesn't want to talk too much. He doesn't want to give out too much information. Somehow, some things he is hiding. So the British and the American investigations, these interrogations, they could never reach a final conclusion. Although you will somewhere in some places read that there was one particular guy called Figs, Colonel Figs, who wrote it out in his report that there was no doubt about Netaji's death. But the evidence he produced suffered from the same problems. That it when you compared the accounts given to Colonel Figs on the basis of which he wrote down his report, the same accounts by the same people did not match the other accounts, or the accounts of the same people when they spoke to other people. For example, there were two doctors in the hospital where supposedly Netaji was treated, and the other plane crash sufferers were treated, the victims were treated. Now, this person told Figs that he had written the death certificate. But when the Japanese government interrogated him 10 years later, he said that I don't know anything about death certificate. I did not write it. So the same person, it was not an ordinary incident. A plane had crashed. There were victims, and there were many dead people. So, it's not something that you can easily forget. Least of all, a doctor forgetting whether he wrote the death certificate or not. It's not acceptable. It's not believable. But what Colonel Figs did, he took all these accounts as the last and final word, and he gave the verdict that Netaji had died in the crash. Now, Figs was later accused by Indians in Japan and also by Indian officials in Japan, in Tokyo Embassy and others of the INA, for embezzling the treasure of INA, funds of INA, in cahoots
Mhm.
with some top leaders of the Indian Independence League, among which were SAIR. SAIR's name came up. Ramamurthy, who was the head of the IIL in Japan at the time, in Tokyo, his name came up, and he was accused of that. So, uh, although he wrote it in his report, that is a single piece of report which actually categorically states that Netaji died. But then, when you put it in the context and compare it with the other accounts and reports, it doesn't match. As a result, the British government never said, even when Mountbatten was asked many years later whether he had any evidence, Mountbatten said that we never found any conclusive evidence. And the same reports were given to Jawaharlal Nehru. He also went through all those reports. He had seen all those reports. And when he was asked categorically whether he can produce any evidence, he said, I have no direct evidence. I have no direct evidence. I have no direct proof. So that was the thing about the Allied Forces investigation. Then and obviously nobody was convinced about the story, so the Indians in India wanted a proper inquiry and investigation, and they petitioned repeatedly to Pandit Nehru and Sardar Patel. But Pandit Nehru took a very categorical stand that he believed that Netaji was dead and there was no need for any inquiry. So what these group of people in India, they said that fine, if you don't want to do it, we will do it unofficially, an independent citizens inquiry. We will raise funds and we will do it on our own. So, being threatened by that prospect, Pandit Nehru set up the Shahnawaz Committee. Now, the Shahnawaz Committee obviously spoke. It was an in camera inquiry where basically people came uh, and gave their statements. There was no cross examination by other parties. There was no lawyer representing the different parties. And they took up the statements, and despite all the contradictions and all the loopholes, somehow he reached the conclusion that Netaji was dead. But obviously, even that, it was clear that the report was so full of loopholes and problems that it convinced nobody except the government of India. In 1955, this Shahnawaz Committee was set up in 1956, and just around that time, that an inquiry was conducted by the Taiwan government at the behest of the government of India. The government of India did not have any direct diplomatic relation with Taiwan, so they could not
I wanted.
uh,
Right.
request directly. They asked the British government, and the British government asked the Taiwanese government to conduct an inquiry. So they conducted an inquiry and sent a report to the Britishers, which was forwarded to the uh, government of India. And the government of India suppressed that report very nicely. It was later on shown to Justice Khosla during the second commission of inquiry, but after that it was suppressed and it was not shown to Justice Mukherjee in the third commission of inquiry. So after this, the public opinion kind of kept on that same level that uh, the plane crash story does not add up. It is not believable, and new information kept coming in from various sources, from different countries, from Russia, from China. Various claims were made and different new angles were coming up. So another movement built up, and in the late 1960s, this movement was led by Professor Samar Guha, and he collected all the members of parliament at that time and pressurized the Indira Gandhi government to set up a new commission. And this time it was a judicial commission which Indira Gandhi set up under the chairmanship of G.D. Khosla. Now, G.D. Khosla was a very well-known judge, but he was also a very close friend of Indira Gandhi and Jawaharlal Nehru. In fact, I mean, when he went abroad for his inquiry, he was shopping for Indira Gandhi. He was found to be shopping for Indira Gandhi. At the time, he was writing a biography of Indira Gandhi. So,
Yeah.
I mean, his credentials, when these facts became known, his credentials were absolutely compromised. And although he reached the same conclusion as Shanwas committee, but he did not address the loopholes, and the problem remained. And these two inquiries, I mean, it is now well known that were kind of rejected by the Prime Minister Morarji Desai when he announced on the floor of Lok Sabha that new information have come in, which now make the conclusions of this committee and the commission invalid. But it was too far away from the time of the plane crash, and setting up a new commission of inquiry did not make sense. So that's where the matter rested for a long time, and it opened up when the Narasimha Rao government wanted to give Bharat Ratna, posthumous Bharat Ratna to Netaji, and then the next HD Devagowda government wanted to bring back the ashes from Renkoji Temple in Tokyo. Then a case was filed in the Kolkata High Court, a PIL was filed, and before that, a PIL was filed in the Rajasthan High Court, and the Rajasthan High Court asked the central government to conduct an inquiry, but the central government ignored it. Now, in 1997, the Kolkata High Court asked the government to set up a fresh inquiry. Now, when this PIL was going on, this case was going on in the Kolkata High Court, the government's own lawyer admitted in front of the court, now this is on record, that there were too many loopholes in the inquiries conducted by Shanwas Committee and Khosla Commission, and those cannot be trusted. So a new commission was set up under the order of the High Court, and which was the Justice Mukherjee Commission of Inquiry, set up in 1999. And after 6 years of inquiry, Justice Mukherjee reached the conclusion. He addressed all the loopholes which were previously highlighted, and clearly, methodically, and legally demonstrated that the story of the plane crash was just a hoax. It was a cover-up for Netaji to be able to escape from the Southeast Asian theater of war. And
Dada, sorry to interrupt. Anuj Dhar has texted that he is into StreamYard. Please accept him.
Right. Anuj Dhar,
Yeah,
thank you for
Chandrachur.
joining us.
Good to see you again. Namaskar.
Thank you
Good
for
evening,
joining
Dada.
us.
Good, Satya. Thank you.
so that's when the Justice Mukherjee Commission of Inquiry, they conducted the investigation for 6 years, and as I said, that legally and very methodically and clinically demonstrated that the story of the plane crash was a hoax. The Japanese, particularly the Southern Command of the Japanese Army, they built this cover. They helped Netaji to escape probably to Russia. But what happened to him if the plane crash did not happen? That is a question which Justice Mukherjee could not answer. He could not answer because of the non-cooperation of our own government, and also lack of information from the other governments, from the other countries, for instance, the Russian government. So obviously, I mean, he had requested that the KGB archives be shown to the commission and documents be taken out. But that was a request which could not have been acceded to by any other country, because everybody knows the government, or every other country knows the stand of the government of India. And when there is it is declared, and when it is a public stand taken by the government that Netaji is dead and he died in 1945, there is no reason why a foreign government would open up a Pandora's box. And when our own intelligence agencies have kept documents and files secret, there is no reason to expect that other countries will open up their vaults. So, due to these many reasons, but it was not possible for Justice Mukherjee to reach a conclusion as to what happened to him. And he asked for more time, but that time was not given to him. The investigation was abruptly terminated, and that's where it landed, because he could not reach that conclusion as to what happened to him. That gave the UPA government, by the time the UPA government had come into power in 2004, the UPA government found the excuse to reject his findings. Although while rejecting, it never showed the reasons. They did not tell the people, they did not tell the parliament why the report was rejected. So they just, in one line, rejected the findings that the plane crash was not true and Netaji did not die in that. So this is the story of the commissions. I mean, there was another commission which was set up, but that was on Gumnami Baba, and that was set up under the order of the High Court of Allahabad High Court. That is a former justice, but that's a different story. As far as Netaji's fate is concerned, these were the three committees and commissions.
Shupriyo was asking something about the commissions. You were having some questions. Shupriyo.
Dada, one small question. Actually, we hear from somewhere that Justice Manoj Mukherjee had some good relations with the CPM leaders. And although it is a political question, I beg to ask actually. So is it right that he had some internal influence from the CPM or so?
How is that relevant? How is that relevant?
No, in case of that, some people say that as because he knew that Netaji is still alive or something like that, but he is not declaring because of an influence or any information from or any...
No, that has nothing to do with this. Justice Mukherjee had to face a lot of hostility from both the governments, both the India governments and the UPA government. And they constantly refused to share files with him, to share information with him. They refused constantly his requested visits to other countries, to Taiwan, to Russia, to UK. And all those were achieved with great difficulty and with a lot of political slugfest. It did not come easily. So both NDA and UPA were creating roadblocks for him. It had nothing to do with his relations with any political party. And as far as why he could not write in his report, although he knew and believed that Netaji was alive in India till 1985, he made, if you read his report, he has made it clear, because although he was on the verge of writing it, but his hands were tied. He got negative reports from government labs, which he was bound to accept. That was the weakness of his work, the main weakness of his report, that although he talked privately about his hunch that the reports were tampered with and there was some kind of fraud committed, he failed to highlight those or even mention those in his report. Had this been Justice Khosla was a prolific writer, and he was an excellent writer. So his report is more like a literature, whereas Justice Mukherjee's report is like a cut and dried judicial order, full of arguments, full of logic, and full of facts. It's not a flowery prose. So Justice Mukherjee should have highlighted. His hands were tied. He was on the verge of accepting that the person named Gumnami Baba was none other than Netaji, and he believed the witnesses, and he categorically wrote that there is no reason not to believe these witnesses, but his hands were tied because of the negative reports from the official labs, and that was the only reason. It had nothing to do with his proximity to any political party, and he had no proximity to any political party. He's a well-known judge. His credentials are absolutely for everybody to see, and his reputation is for there to everybody to check. And his political connections, I'm hearing this for the first time. I've never come across this allegation before. And even if there was some element of truth, it had nothing to do with his findings or conclusion.
Right, Dada. Thanks for the
Dada,
answer.
there were
Actually, I also got this question from somebody. I also was not clear. That's why I asked you. Yeah, over to
Okay.
Bodhisattva.
Dada, there is another important aspect. Though both of you, both Anuj and you, have been saying the matter number of times on various platforms about declassification of files. But as we are addressing the Indic Society of Assam, a group of young people today, so there were many people who were having, confusions about the declassification of files. Whether, as you, both of you, and the Mission Netaji were fighting for declassification of files. So there is a huge confusion regarding whether all the files are declassified or not, and what are the related aspects related to declassification of secret files, and whether the files are declassified, and if it is not done, then why it is not done. The question is to both of you.
See, declassification is a process which was foreign to our government. It was not a usual practice in advanced countries, in developed countries, where they have for decades, for over a century, they have laws which stipulate that all information, all official files will be put in public domain after a specified period of time. Sometimes this period of time have been changed, amended by these governments, for the American government or the British government or any other government. It can be 20 years, it can be 30 years, it can be 40 years. They keep changing depending on the situation and the circumstances and the sensitivity of the matter. But they have a mechanism. So where files are routinely declassified. In our country, it is a very ad hoc process. Declassification is governed not by any law. The Official Secrets Act is there, but it does not uh, give a proper framework for declassification. The declassification is actually governed by a manual of office procedure. So that allows certain officers within the ministries to send old files, maybe 20 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, to the National Archive. The declassification, the word was not used, but the process got a boost with the framing of the Right to Information Act, which for the
Right.
first time set a stipulated time period. It said the government cannot refuse any information that is more than 20 years old. So they are bound by the law to give any information which is more than 20 years old. And even then, when we started our campaign for declassification in 2006, the government routinely violated this law. And obviously, that got us the help from the Central Information Commission. And because we questioned every step, every time they refused information which is more than 20 years old. And as a result, we were able to get thousands of papers, thousands of pages declassified. And that is unprecedented. Nowhere in India's history you will find a similar example where a pressure group of 3 or 4 people constantly badgering the government and forcing the government with the help of this new law to declassify thousands of documents. It has never been done, and it has not been done after that. So when we were running our declassification campaign, we were at the same time also asking the government, tell us how many classified files do you have? What is the exact number of classified files do you have? Otherwise, the
You're
declassification
saying
process.
about 2006. Are you saying about 2006?
From 2006, we started asking the
Okay.
question. We kept on asking the
Right.
question. And the government always came up with different numbers. Sometimes they said 30 files, sometimes they said 28 files, sometimes they said 39 files. They were never consistent. Now, even when the Modi government started the declassification process, uh, they never gave the exact number of classified files. They said we will declassify all files, but they never said how many files are there. So they said that the government said that first month we will declassify 50 files. Next month onward we will declassify 25 files each month. But then the natural question for everybody to ask was, how many files do you have? The government
Right.
never answered the question, and our media, national media, never asked the government this question. So it went. There was a kind of a cover always on the process, because we never knew how long this will continue and how many files exactly are there. So when it came out and stopped the process at 304 files, we were surprised at one level that this government, our government, not the BJP government only, but the previous governments too, were giving us numbers in tens and twenties and thirties. How did the number reach 300? So obviously they were not telling the truth at that time. Now, how do you know that the current government is telling the truth? Unless a full accounting is done and the government releases that these are the classified files which we cannot touch right now, you will never know the full picture. What we know for certain at this moment is that the government has not declassified a single intelligence file by the intelligence agencies, different intelligence agencies. So that is a clear chunk of files which are still missing, but the government is telling a blatant lie to the people of the country, even to the parliament. I mean, the government has misled the parliament by saying that they have declassified all files. We know that, I mean, there is a list of 77 intelligence files, but we know that those are old vintage files. Those are not the files that we are talking about. We are talking about files of the vintage post 1947, post 1950. Files have been generated, and there are enough indications, there are enough leads available in other files, in other documents. So we know that there are plenty of files which are still not declassified. So that's where we stand. We still don't know whether all files have been declassified, but we certainly know that the intelligence files have not been declassified.
Okay.
Rather, can we assume that
My
lots of
question
files
to
has
my
been
question to
destroyed? Yeah, lots of file
just a second. So,
has been
Supriya, my
destroyed.
question.
Yeah,
Supriya, just a second. My question to
yeah,
Anuj
yeah.
is, though Anuj have been, answering those questions in social media a number of times, but then also I would like Anuj to tell or to address us again that Mission Netaji this time has got a list of proposals which you have been mentioning. The most important one is the man who gave us independence. So why do you think that Netaji is the key person for whom we have got our independence? Anusda, please.
See, there are number of reasons. In fact, this is an open secret for in the last 70 odd years. My own grandfather fought against the INA, so I know my own personal, my anecdotal information I can give from my own side, and I know that the British were ruling this country using our armed forces, and these very armed forces began to turn against them because of Subhash Chandra Bose. Now this is something which was known to public. Don't forget, Red Fort trials happened in Delhi. Everybody was aware. People were reading newspapers, so people were aware. But after a new government, after transfer power, the government suppressed tried to suppress the information, and of course they came up with their own theory of ahimsa winning us freedom. At the same time, people never forgot, so this issue remained alive in pop, pop history, so to speak. People were aware; they were always talking about it. What changed, of course, in last 20 odd years or probably more, that a lot of information became available by way of documents from the British side, and as well as the accounts given by those who are privy to those sort of information. For example, in 1970s, you have the transfer of power volume, becoming public for the first time. So we knew for the first time what was going on in the minds of the British rulers in those days. So this sort of thing was, you can clearly see reflected in these. They were, for example, there was a noting by the IB director in which he mentioned the effect of the INA trials on the armed forces, something which is something incredible, so on and so forth. So, and then of course General Sinha came out and he gave his own view in 1986. So in last couple of years, so many people, so many accounts have become available. In our book Conundrum, we have we have quoted from, and we also given copies of military intelligence notes. Now these files have become they became available in National Archive recently in India. So now, so we have plenty of information, and of course the most important information which one can cite. Of course, Clement Attlee was in India in '56, then he himself admitted to Fani Bhushan Chakraborty, who was the Chief Justice of Calcutta High Court. So obviously you have to believe a judge. He was not a politician. He was not a journalist. He was a
Right.
judge. He was a very eminent judge. So anybody else I could have ignored. And then he and also Barun Day, the historian, also verified the same thing. He didn't go public with it, at that time, but later on he also admitted that I had spoken to Mr. Attlee and Attlee has said so. So this being available. In fact, many now this government we're talking about, the government led by the BJP. It is a common knowledge. I mean, there's so many publications, of the RSS and the BJP. It's common. People used to talk for 20 years. These are the people who were talking about these things. You will find so many ministers, members. Even our National Security Advisor Ajit Doval was talking about it publicly, when he was not the NSA, but he was a former IB director. So this has been in an open and public secret. Everybody knows this in India, that India became free because of this particular reason. But then to accept is a problem, because it's a politically, very difficult job to do. And unfortunately, the reason why it's not getting accepted because of the fact that nobody's applying pressure for it. I keep saying, when we were young, we did not. Both Baba Saheb Ambedkar and Sardar Patel were mere footnotes in history. And look what their followers have achieved in last 20 odd years. How they have turned everything around, and how they have ensured that you cannot politically ignore these two icons of Indian history. Unfortunately, that sort of a thing has not happened for Subhash Chandra Bose. Now, as we talk about the Netaji's birth anniversary and what's been happening in Calcutta and in Delhi, neither BJP nor TMC, nobody's talking about this part. They are talking about peripheral things, like you're praising Subhash Bose. He was a great leader. Great
Celebrations
leaders
and
are
all.
dime a dozen in country. I have got 100 great leaders, in Aam Aadmi Party in New Delhi. So that doesn't make. He was a man who freed you. So you must accept that fact. The problem is that nobody is willing to accept that fact, and that's why they are not talking about. And they will probably. My worry is that on 23rd of January they will just engage into these peripheral activities, which probably would mean nothing. Garlanding Netaji's statue here and there, and saying he was secular and he was in the BJP is not secular. BJP would probably will say something else. That I am sure won't make any difference. But so you must accept this thing, which is anyway commonly accepted, and that India became free because of this man. That's the tribute you can pay to him on his 125th anniversary. That's the single most important point so far as Netaji is concerned. Mind you, when we used to talk about the issue of Subhash Bose's fate, Chandrachur was talking, told you about, given overview of what we did, what we achieved. We obtained thousands of pages, previously classified. Chandrachur, if we had obtained even 5 documents previously declassified about Mahatma Gandhi, we would have got an award from the government of India. Forget about thousands of pages. 5 pages you have got from outside concerning Bapu, government would have opened.
That would be front page news in Times of India.
Front page Times of India, Calcutta edition, and we would have been much more famous in Calcutta than we are today right now. So this is how it is, like, and this is the point on which we should be focusing on. We should, that's what we can do in the age of social media, and reach out
Dada,
to
do you
people.
think that people are serious about this matter now? Do you think, what is your opinion about that? Whether
Are you
the
talking
people
about
are serious
people of the
about it?
government, the political parties? No, they are not.
No,
I
people
don't
in
think.
general. People in general.
I would not say everybody. See, please understand. Even Bhagwan Ram did not have 100%. Nobody, not everybody liked him. Even there are people in his days who did not like him. So you cannot say. So Subhash Chandra Bose was not a people 100% acceptability is only for the cricketers and film stars. Freedom fighters
And
are
it's
never
not
that
only
much.
acceptability, it's also about the awareness. I mean, when the one thing we realized after the movie Gumnami was released is that so many people who got in touch with us, and they were writing on social media, hundreds of them. And it was really painful to see at one level. We were happy that people were receiving it nicely, and they were happy about the movie, and they liked it, they loved it. That was a good part of it. But the sad part of it was that it actually needed a movie for people in Bengal to become aware of Netaji and his life. And that was in 2019. I mean, that was, I mean, for us it was difficult to comprehend that Bengalis, so many of them were not aware of Netaji's life, about his death, about his work, and they became aware of it and started asking questions only after they watched the movie. So they just have an image, a perception of Netaji in the corner of their mind, where he is a hero riding a white horse with a gun or a sword, and
With the sword in
kind
his
of
hand.
leading an army. That's the image that has remained there. There has been no serious inquiry or an effort to set him up in his proper place. I mean, that's what we are. That's why, and that's one reason why other pressure groups, why other political groups have been been able to propagate complete bunkum and like Gandhian socialism, Gandhian socialism. I mean, God knows what that might be, and nobody has any idea what Gandhian socialism is. And that is apparently based on religion, and then it becomes socialistic, but it is not the Western socialism. So, I mean, that kind of khichdi, if that becomes a national dogma and tenet for the ruling party, and people tend to accept that, that if that can happen, then I fail to understand why Netaji's cogent, coherent political philosophy, his body of political principles, his practical work in the field of external affairs, global affairs, strategic thinking, uh, thinking about military forces, why they cannot occupy the center stage, because they are a very coherent body of thoughts and implemented during his public life. So if that has not happened, then all those people who love to do Netaji Puja and want to flaunt their
It's not even puja.
admiration.
Puja is no, they don't puja. They just it's like
That
a
is puja.
tokenism.
I mean,
It's basically
अगरबत्ती
show off
जलाओ,
for
दो
for
दिया
one day.
दिखा दो, घंटी बजा दो, बस बात खत्म.
That's khatam.
बात
Only for
वहीं पे
one day.
खत्म.
Otherwise,
So
you come to think of it now. 23rd is coming. You got 40 odd MPs from Bengal. So why can't they? This is the basic thing. Everywhere across the country, people admit India became free because of this man. Why can't people of Bengal say this thing with pride? That's what we worry about. I haven't seen a single statement coming from either TMC or BJP Bengal on these lines. They will just do peripheral activities like garlanding Netaji's photograph here and there, and that's all. Nothing else. So that means nothing at the end of the day. That means nothing at the end.
Borun, if you have something
Forget
to
about it
ask,
on 24th.
both Anuj Dhar Chandrachur Ghose. Borun has joined us from Guwahati.
yeah, go ahead if you have any question.
Yeah, please go
Borun,
ahead.
you were saying something.
Unfortunately, we don't have much more time. We just might have
I
5 more
know,
minutes.
I know.
5 minutes because we need
Yes,
to go to another.
just a second. Supriyo, if you have anything to ask or say anything.
Yeah, yeah. I
This is
was
an
asking
opportunity
one
that
question.
both
I will
Chandrachur
come back.
Dhar and Anuj Dhar with
Right,
us.
both of them are there, and
Right.
Mission Netaji in front of us. They're
Right.
live in front
Absolutely.
of us. Actually, this is a good time,
Great
good
opportunity.
discussion we're having today. Right, great opportunity. So Anuzda and Chandrachurda, my question is that from the starting of Mission Netaji days to till date, what was the most shaking information you all got? One single information, if I ask, what was the most shaking information what you all got during the research?
That had to be about the espionage, I think, about the snooping, because we had no idea that the snooping was going on in that scale. And had we not got these documents declassified, and Anuj happened to stumble upon them in the National Archives, and that would not have been possible. And that was a watershed moment for us, and that is what turned the entire movement from 2014.
Otherwise, nowhere in any point of time you would find Netaji being discussed prime time on national television. All the channels are covering it. All the top anchors. This never happened. This happened only in 2015.
Right. And thank you, Dada, for answering. And for second question, what I had is how many number of files are expectedly destroyed in the past? Can we assume like that? How many
No, they must
files
have
like
decided,
that would have
but
been?
we can account for, because see, we can, the only way we can account for some, because their names are they're described in the government records which have become available. But as Chandrachur was telling you, we do not know what we do not know. So these are just an unknown sort of thing. So we do not know, but we can only make a hunch. So they must have
Right.
destroyed many files. The IB must have collected a huge a mountain of files by now, actually. If they are not
unless an
there, that
audit,
would be
unless
destroyed.
an audit is done from 1945 till date, audit of all files lying with the central government and the state governments, we would know, and the government has no intention of being so transparent.
Government has no intention, and people are not forcing them. In fact, the people of Bengal are not forcing them to do anything. I mean, otherwise, 42 with 40 odd MPs, you can turn the whole world around. And in the name of, I mean, MPs from Bengal are very vociferous otherwise. They are not people who are like sitting on the back benches. They're very vociferous in parliament otherwise. They make news all the whole year around in
May I
national
ask a
media.
question if
So
I'm
why can't they
audible enough?
take Netaji's name and then?
Yeah, Borun has joined us from Guwahati. He's asking a question.
Quickly, because we gotta go now, huh? Yes, Barun,
Borun,
please go ahead.
quickly ask the question. Hello, Borun, are you
Bad
there?
network.
Yeah.
I think he's disconnected.
He's
He has
having
posted
network
a
issue.
question actually, but he's trying to ask that when would this confusion will end about Netaji's death mystery? The question is
I think the
to
day
both of you.
the day people of Bengal start asking question properly, the day Netaji's admirer all over the country, they start behaving like Sardar Patel's followers have done. We need to follow the footstep of Baba Sahib Ambedkar's followers, the way they have turned whole thing around in 20 years. Things will start to
The
change.
day
You have a
when we
very
stop being so happy, the day when we stop being so happy and so glad, if a chief minister and if a prime minister gives a speech on 23rd January, we become so happy. Oh, they gave a speech on 23rd January, as if
बड़ा
that is
आसान
the
कर
be
दिया
all
बातें.
and end all of it. The day we stop being happy about that and turn around and ask them, speech is fine. What about the proper information? Where are the files? Why are you not acknowledging his role? That's the day when hundreds of people actually start asking that question. That's the day when the mystery will come to an end.
Absolutely, Dada. Yeah. So one last
Shubho, if you have
question.
anything more to ask,
Yeah, last question. One last question.
last question,
Both of
last
you.
question. Okay. Last
Okay.
question to both of you.
Is that what all activities both of you are planning in this year? What major activities is Miss
Our new
Netaji
book is
planning
coming
for?
out. Like,
The
Do we
situation is still
really
not
see
normal,
the
and we
Netaji?
are not in a position. So let's see. Let's see. We will keep everyone posted. Let's see. I mean, there are many in planning stage, but not yet time to make them public. So as and when things materialize and things normalize, the situation normalizes, we will definitely, because we work among the public, so definitely we will come out and inform everybody.
but one thing that is
Nice.
happening, we have a new book coming, new book releasing next week.
Okay.
That's
That's
great news,
that's
Dada.
great news, Dada. That's great news.
Yeah.
And we think that throughout the year we'll be celebrating facts about Netaji. So let us celebrate facts about Netaji. So both to
Absolutely.
Chandrachur Da and Anuj Da, we thank you very much for joining us, giving us time.
Pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Uh,
Many
I
thanks,
wish I
Dada.
could stay for
Thank
more
many
you.
time, but
thanks for joining us.
Pleasure.
Many thanks for joining us. Good night to both of you.
thank you. Good night,
Good
everybody.
night.
Thank you.